Most valuable hitter and pitcher, biggest over and underachievers, and more. The 2023 awards are up next on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball Today in 5 on Monday, October 9th. I'm Chris Welsh, joined by Mr. Scott White, the award giver. He giveth, he doesn't taketh. There are a bunch of awards we went through on the main podcast, but today we are going to be giving you just 5, maybe 5 of the most important. Mr. Scott White, let's jump right into it. 2023's most valuable hitter is who?
It's Ronald Acuna. It's maybe too obvious of an answer, and a lot of times I like to focus on the word value here, meaning best bang for the buck in fantasy. But Ronald Acuna was just such a runaway winner among hitters. First ever 40 homer, 70 steal season. We've talked about that, but some other numbers to put his season into context. He had 27 more stolen bases than any other 40 homer guy in history. He had 13 more homers than any other 70 steal guy in history. Maybe the most overlooked stat of all is his 149 runs scored. That was the second most for any player since 1949. And he did it all while batting 337, which would have led the majors 3 of the past 5 years. It's arguably the best rotisserie season in history. And Ronald Acuna, that makes him the most valuable hitter.
Yeah, I think the only arguments, if you wanted to focus on value, could be moving down probably 5 rounds to Corbin Carroll.
That's what I thought about, yeah.
Yeah, top 3. And I think people might push back a little bit further to a guy that does have an award that we're not talking about today, but a guy like Nolan Jones, who, an undrafted free agent who produced. But I think that's going a little too far because not only did Ronald Acuna produce first round value, first overall value, he destroyed expectations across the board. That is why this is a great award winner. Coming on at number 2, the most valuable pitcher for 2023. Is it going to be a big name? Is it going to be a deeper name? Who do we have?
It's going to be a big name. It's going to be Spencer Strider. In a year where there were so few standout pitchers, he stood out in a couple of significant ways. He had 44 more strikeouts than any other pitcher. He also had 3 more wins than any other pitcher. And I mean, wins in any traditional fantasy format, that's the most valuable stat at all. We don't analyze it much because it's not the most predictable stat, but Spencer Strider got him. He got to 20 wins. So in spite of the 3.86 ERA, I think he's the most valuable pitcher. There were some better bang for the buck types, but I feel like Strider, sort of like Acuna, was such a big standout that I had to give it to him. I mean, he's now clearly the number 1 pitcher who's going to be drafted next year.
Yeah, the closest could have been maybe a Blake Snell, but he had an enormous whip. He did a lot of the other good things. But yeah, to your point, Strider was taken near the top. He now will sit at the very top. 2023's biggest overachiever is who?
And this is the award I wanted to reserve for Blake Snell. So Blake Snell probably going to be the NL Cy Young with a 2.25 ERA. StatCast says his ERA should actually be 3.74. So nearly a 1.5 difference there between the actual ERA and the expected ERA. It's in fact the biggest difference for any qualifying starting pitcher. And I think it mostly has to do with the fact Blake Snell, 5 walks per 9 innings, which is crazy. I'm not sure we'll ever see a Cy Young winner who has 5 walks per 9 innings again. And just given also Blake Snell's track record, I think we should be very skeptical of his ability to repeat a 2.25 ERA.
All right, on the opposite end, 2023's biggest underachiever is who?
That would be Vladimir Guerrero, who hit 264 despite having a 291 XBA. He hit 444 despite having a 494 X slug. His xWOBA 374 was almost halfway between the 2021 xWOBA, where he was the best player in fantasy, and the 2022 xWOBA, where he was a disappointment, but still really good. And yet he finished with the worst numbers of all this year. And, after 2 disappointing seasons, it's kind of a fool me once, shame on you fool me twice, shame on me situation. I forgot the saying there for a
You
second.
almost did. You almost did the bit though. You almost did
Yeah.
the whole bit. You can't get fooled again. That's what you almost did.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. In the most Fantasy Baseball Today award of all, here he is, Mr. 2023, Mr. Glob. The award winner for Mr. Glob himself, the most prestigious of all the Fantasy Baseball Today awards, is who?
It's Mitch Keller. He's the most representative of the Glob, I think, because of the extreme highs and lows he had as a starting pitcher. He had a complete game shutout this year. He had 2 starts with 8 shutout innings. He had a 12 strikeout start. He had a 13 strikeout start. He had some great starts, but then Mitch Keller also had 4 starts in which he allowed 7 earned runs or more. If you take out those 7 earned runs or more, his ERA goes from 421. 421 is what he actually had. Without those 4 starts, it's 313 to go along with a 114 whip and 10.1 K per 9. He'd be an ace. I think he has ace upside because those great starts are ones only attainable to aces, but the Glob got him. The snowball effect that this environment caused for bad starts to snowball. That happened to so many pitchers, but I think Mitch Keller is the most notable of all.
For more awards and extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Audacy app, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thank you for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. We'll be back again on Wednesday. Bye-bye.